The Galactic Council ridiculed Earth's plea. Then humanity rose to its feet. Part 1. The Humiliation. The ship was quiet as it moved through the stars. Ambassador Kim Dong-woo stood near the window and watched the lights of distant worlds pass by like fireflies in the dark. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. In a few hours, he would speak to beings who had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. He would ask them for help. He would beg if he had to. Behind him, Lieutenant Park Yuna checked her translation device for the 100th time. She was young, only 28 years old, but she spoke 11 alien languages. She had trained her whole life for this moment. Still, her fingers shook as she worked. "Are you ready?" Dong-woo asked without turning around. "No," Yuna admitted, "but I don't think anyone could be ready for this." Dong-woo smiled sadly. "That is the most honest thing I have heard all week." The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and suddenly the planet Nexara Prime filled the window. It was beautiful in a cold way. A world made of crystal and metal, shining like a diamond against the black sky. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, where 3,000 species came together to make decisions that shaped the universe. And today, humanity would ask to join them. The docking process took an hour. Alien officials checked their ship with machines that hummed and clicked. Guards with too many eyes watched them with expressions that might have been curiosity or disgust. Dong-woo kept his face calm. He had been a diplomat for 40 years. He knew how to hide his fear. The council chamber was the largest room Dong-woo had ever seen. It stretched upward for what seemed like miles, filled with floating platforms where thousands of alien representatives sat. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all, just clouds of light that pulsed with colors humans had no names for. At the center of it all sat the 5 elder races. They were the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, and they ruled the council with absolute power. High Chancellor Morvax sat at their head, a creature that looked like a tree made of silver metal, with eyes that glowed like red stars. Dong-woo walked to the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at him. The small, fragile creature from a small, fragile world. He cleared his throat and began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he said, his voice steady. "I am Kim Dong-woo, Ambassador of Earth. I come before you today to ask for 2 things. First, we request membership in this great council. Second, and more urgent, we ask for your help against the Vorax swarm." The name sent whispers through the chamber. The Vorax were known throughout the galaxy, a species of living ships that consumed entire worlds. They had destroyed 17 civilizations in the past 1,000 years, and now they were moving toward Earth. Dong-woo continued. "The Vorax will reach human space in 18 months. Our military is strong, but we cannot defeat them alone. We ask the Council to honor its promise of protection for all member species. We ask you to stand with us." He stopped speaking. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then High Chancellor Morvax laughed. It was a horrible sound, like metal scraping against stone. Other aliens joined in, their laughter mixing together into a wave of mockery that crashed over Dong-woo like cold water. "You come here," Morvax said, his voice booming through the chamber, "from a world that discovered fire only yesterday. Your species has existed for what? 10,000 years? We have buildings older than your entire civilization." More laughter. "Your ships are slow, your weapons are weak, your bodies are soft and fragile." Morvax leaned forward, his red eyes burning. "You are insects asking giants for protection against other insects. The Vorax are a problem, yes, but they are your problem. Why should we waste our resources on creatures who will be extinct in a century anyway?" Dong-woo felt his face grow hot. Behind him, he heard Yuna make a small sound of anger, but he kept his voice calm. "We may be young," he said, "but we have value. We have scientists, artists, thinkers. We have things to offer the galaxy." "You have nothing," Morvax replied. "You are bacteria pretending to be people. Return to your little world and enjoy what time you have left. When you have something worth offering the galaxy, perhaps we will listen. Until then, this council has no interest in your problems." The laughter rose again, louder than before. Dongwu stood in the center of it, alone and small and surrounded by beings who saw him as nothing more than an amusing joke. He closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Earth, of the blue oceans and green forests, of the cities full of people who were counting on him. He thought of his daughter, who was 3 years old and did not know that monsters were coming to destroy everything she loved. When he opened his eyes, something had changed. His fear was gone. In its place was something harder, something colder. He bowed once, formal and precise. Then he spoke, and his voice cut through the laughter like a knife. "Then we will handle it ourselves, and when we are done, you will remember this day. You will remember that you laughed, and you will wish that you had not." The laughter faded. Something in his voice made even Morvax pause. But then the mockery returned, and the guards escorted the humans out of the chamber. Dongwu walked with his head high. Yuna walked beside him, her hands clenched into fists. "They will regret this," she whispered. Dongwu nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "They will." The ship carried them away from Nexara Prime, back toward the small blue world that the galaxy had written off as already dead. But Earth was not dead. Not yet. And humanity was only beginning to understand what it was capable of. The Galactic Council ridiculed Earth's plea. Then humanity rose to its feet. Part 2. The Awakening. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Every screen, every radio, every phone carried the same message. The galaxy had rejected humanity. The Vorax were coming, and no one was going to save them. For 3 days, the world was silent. People walked through the streets with empty eyes. Parents held their children and did not know what to say. It seemed like the end of everything. But on the 4th day, something changed. It started small. A factory worker in Detroit refused to go home. "If we're going to die," he said, "I'd rather die building something." His co-workers stayed with him. By morning, the factory was running at full speed, producing parts for warships that did not exist yet. In Seoul, a retired general named Lee Tae-hyun walked into the United Earth Government headquarters. He had fought in 3 wars and had been ready to die peacefully in his garden. But peace was no longer an option. "I want my job back," he said simply. They gave him more than his job. They made him supreme commander of all Earth's military forces. It was the highest rank any human had ever held, and it came with the hardest task in human history: save humanity from extinction. Tae-hyun called a meeting of the world's best minds. They gathered in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, scientists, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers. Among them was Dr. Choi Soo-min, a quantum physicist who had been called crazy by her colleagues for years. Her theories about weapons technology were considered too dangerous, too extreme. The scientific community had ignored her. Now, they listened. "The council species are afraid of certain technologies," Soo-min explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "They banned them because they consider them too destructive. But we are not part of the council. Their rules do not apply to us." She showed them her designs. Weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Shields that could absorb energy and throw it back at attackers. Engines that broke every law of physics that humans had ever known. "Can you build these?" Tae-hyun asked. "Give me resources and people," Soo-min replied. "I can build anything." Across the world, humanity began to wake up. Factories that had made cars started making fighters. Universities that had studied stars started studying weapons. Every nation on Earth put aside its differences and worked together for the first time in history. Admiral Bayek Ji Hee took command of the new fleet that was being built. She was a small woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She had never lost a battle in her 30-year career, and she did not plan to start now. "The aliens think we are weak because we are young," she told her officers. "They are wrong. We are not weak. We are hungry. We are angry. And we are going to make them choke on their laughter." In the shipyards of Japan, a brilliant engineer named Kwon Hyun-soo led a team that worked without sleep for weeks. They took apart every piece of alien technology that humans had ever captured or traded for. They studied it. They learned from it. And then they made it better. "The Council species stopped improving their technology thousands of years ago," Hyun-soo explained. "They think they have reached perfection. But we look at their machines and we see 100 ways to make them faster, stronger, deadlier." The first new warship rolled out of the factory 6 months after the Council's rejection. They called it the Defiance class. It was smaller than most alien warships, but it was faster and carried more weapons. Its hull was made of a new metal that Su-min had invented, something that could repair itself when damaged. Admiral Bayek stood on the bridge of the first ship, the Never Kneel, and smiled for the first time in months. "This will do," she said quietly. While Earth prepared for war, Ambassador Dongwu worked in the shadows. He could not get help from the Council, but not every species agreed with the Council's decision. Some of the smaller races remembered what it was like to be weak and afraid. He met in secret with Representative Callus of the Mendari. Callus was a gentle creature with 6 arms and sad eyes. His people had once been great, but the Council had abandoned them during their own time of need. Half their species had died. "We cannot fight beside you openly," Callus said. "The Council would destroy us, but we can give you information, trade routes, Vorax weaknesses, things that might help." Dongwu took his hand. "Why would you risk so much for us?" "Because 40 years ago, we stood where you stand now. We begged for help, and the Council laughed." Callus's eyes filled with tears. "I do not want to see another species broken the way we were broken. Fight well, human. Some of us will be watching. And hoping." Dongwu returned to Earth with data that would save millions of lives. Vorax biology, their attack patterns, the location of their home world. General Taehyun studied the information and began to plan. "They think they are coming to feast on easy prey," he said. "They are wrong. They are walking into a trap. And when the jaws close, we will teach the galaxy what happens when you corner humanity." Outside the bunker, the night sky was full of new stars, the lights of human warships gathering like wolves in the darkness. Earth was no longer afraid. Earth was ready. The Galactic Council ridiculed Earth's plea. Then humanity rose to its feet. Part 3. First Blood. The Vorax came early. They were supposed to arrive in 18 months. They came in 15. Perhaps they were eager. Perhaps they had heard that humanity was preparing and wanted to crush them before they could become a threat. Whatever the reason, the monsters appeared in human space 3 months ahead of schedule. Their first target was New Busan, a colony world at the edge of human territory. It was a beautiful planet of green forests and silver lakes, home to 2 million people who had traveled across the stars to build a new life. When the Vorax fleet appeared in orbit, most of those people were already gone. Admiral Bayek had ordered evacuations of all outer colonies weeks ago. The last transport ships had left just hours before the enemy arrived, but the planet was not undefended. Captain Oh Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Unbroken, watching the enemy fleet fill his screen. He was 43 years old, with a scar across his face from a training accident and hands that never shook. He had 12 ships under his command. The Vorax had over 100. His communications officer looked at him with fear in her eyes. "Sir, headquarters is suggesting we retreat. We're outnumbered 10-1. Minho smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Tell headquarters that we understand the suggestion," he said. "Then tell them no." The bridge went silent. Everyone stared at their captain. "We cannot win this fight," his first officer said carefully. "You know that, sir?" "Yes," Minho agreed. "We cannot win, but we can hurt them. We can make them bleed. We can show them that every inch of human space will cost them dearly." He turned to face his crew. "The galaxy thinks we are weak. The Vorax think we are food. Today we prove them wrong. Today we teach them fear." He opened a channel to all his ships. His voice was calm and clear. "All ships, this is Captain O. Activate Protocol Omega. We are not here to survive. We are here to make them understand that humanity does not go quietly. We are here to make them remember us. Now let's show these monsters what humans are made of." The 12 ships of the human fleet surged forward into the wall of Vorax bioships. The enemy vessels were massive, living creatures wrapped in armor, with weapons that grew from their bodies like tumors. They had consumed 17 civilizations. They had never known defeat. They were about to learn. The first wave of human missiles tore through the Vorax formation. The aliens had shields that could stop most weapons, but Dr. Sumin's new warheads did not care about shields. They created small tears in space itself, appearing inside the enemy ships and detonating from within. 6 Vorax ships died in the first minute. The aliens screamed, a psychic howl that made human crews grab their heads in pain. But they did not stop fighting. They could not stop. They had nowhere to retreat to. All they could do was push forward and take as many enemies with them as possible. The unbroken dove straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Its shields failed within minutes, and its hull began to melt under enemy fire. But Minho kept his ship moving, firing every weapon until they were empty. "Engineering," he called out. "How long until the core overloads?" 3 minutes, sir, maybe 4. "Good. Navigation, plot a course directly into that big, ugly one in the center, the one that looks like a commander." His crew did not hesitate. They followed his orders without question. Some of them were crying. None of them ran. The unbroken, burning, and dying flew straight into the largest Vorax ship in the fleet. The collision was spectacular. 2 vessels coming together in a bloom of fire and twisted metal. And then the core exploded, and both ships disappeared in a flash of light that could be seen from the surface of the planet below. Captain O Minho died with the names of his children on his lips. But he was not alone. Across the battlefield, human ships followed the same pattern. They rammed, they exploded, they fought like cornered wolves with nothing to lose. Pilots ejected from their cockpits and used personal jets to reach enemy ships, planting explosives on their hulls with their own hands before the vacuum took them. One young pilot, Lieutenant Yoon Da-yoon, flew her damaged fighter directly into the mouth of a Vorax carrier. The explosion destroyed the entire launch bay and killed hundreds of Vorax spawn. Her last words, recorded by her black box, were simple: "For Earth, for everyone." When the battle finally ended, the human fleet was gone. All 12 ships destroyed. All hands lost. But the Vorax had lost 62 vessels. It was more ships than they had lost in the last 100 years combined. Against a species they had considered already conquered, against prey they had expected to devour without resistance, the surviving Vorax withdrew from New Busan. They needed time to understand what had happened. They needed time to mourn their dead, something they had never done before. Across the galaxy, the footage of the battle spread like fire. Species that had never heard of humanity watched the small ships dive into the enemy fleet, fighting beyond all reason, dying with defiance on their lips. On Nexara Prime, High Chancellor Morvax watched the recording in silence. His advisors had no explanation. His military commanders had no answers. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are children. They are insects. How did they do this?" No one could answer him. Far away on Earth, General Tae-hyun stood before a memorial that was still being built. The names of the fallen were being carved into black stone, one by one. "They died well," Admiral Beck said softly, standing beside him. "They died as heroes," Tae-hyun replied. "And they showed the Voraks something they have never seen before. They showed them that we are not afraid." He looked up at the stars, where the enemy still waited. "Now," he said, "we finish what they started." The Galactic Council ridiculed Earth's plea. Then humanity rose to its feet. Part 4. The tide turned. 6 months had passed since the Battle of New Busan. 6 months of blood and fire and death. The Voraks had pushed deeper into human space. They had taken 4 colony worlds, burning them down to bare rock. Millions of humans had died. Cities that had taken generations to build were turned to ash in hours. But the Voraks were bleeding too. Every world they took cost them ships. Every system they entered became a trap. Humanity fought with a desperation that the galaxy had never seen before. They used tricks and traps and tactics that no species had ever tried. They attacked supply lines. They poisoned planets before abandoning them. They turned asteroids into bombs and moons into fortresses. The Voraks had expected to feast. Instead, they found themselves starving. General Tae-hyun stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, studying the enemy positions. Admiral Beck stood beside him, along with Ambassador Dongwoo and the other leaders of Earth. "We are hurting them," Tae-hyun said, "but not fast enough. At this rate, they will reach Earth in 8 months. We need something bigger, something that will end this war in one stroke." Admiral Bayek stepped forward. She was thinner than she had been 6 months ago. Her hair had gone completely white, but her eyes still burned with cold fire. "Operation Falling Star," she said. She touched the map, and it zoomed in on a system at the far edge of the galaxy. A red world orbited a dying star, the homeworld of the Voraks swarm. "The Voraks are controlled by a single being," Beck explained. "They call her the Queen Mother. She is the heart of the swarm, the mind that connects all of them. If she dies, the swarm falls into chaos. They will tear themselves apart." "And how do we reach her?" Dongwoo asked. "That world is 10,000 light-years behind enemy lines." Beck smiled her thin smile. "Dr. Su-min has developed new jump drives. Experimental. Dangerous. They can take a ship directly to the Voraks' homeworld in a single leap." She paused. "But they burn out after one use. Any fleet that goes will not be coming back." The room was silent for a long moment. "You are asking for volunteers for a suicide mission," Tae-hyun said quietly. "I am asking for heroes," Baek replied. 50 ships, 10,000 people. That is all I need to end this war forever." "And who will lead this fleet?" Admiral Bayek straightened her uniform and looked Tae-hyun directly in the eyes. "I will." The call for volunteers went out across Earth. They needed 10,000 people willing to die for humanity. Within 24 hours, they had 5 million names. Admiral Beck selected her crews personally. She chose veterans of New Busan and young pilots who had never seen combat. She chose engineers and doctors and soldiers. She chose anyone who was willing to fly into hell and never return. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Shin Hai-wan. She was 29 years old, the youngest captain in the fleet. She had lost her parents to the Voraks when they destroyed the colony world of New Seoul. She had lost her brother at New Busan. She had nothing left but rage and duty. "Why did you volunteer?" Admiral Beck asked her during the selection process. "Because someone has to," Hae-won answered simply, "and because I want to look the Queen Mother in the eyes before I kill her." Beck nodded and handed her the command codes for the Unconquered. The 50 ships gathered in high orbit above Earth. They were painted black, with no markings except for a single word on each hull: Remember. On the day of the mission, the entire planet stopped to watch. Schools closed. Factories went silent. Billions of people looked up at the sky and whispered prayers for the heroes who were about to leave. Admiral Beck stood on the bridge of the Never Kneel and opened a channel to all ships. "Today we do what no species has ever done," she said. "We strike at the heart of the Vorax swarm. We kill their queen. We end their threat forever. None of us will return, but all of us will be remembered. For as long as humanity exists, they will tell stories about this day. They will remember that when the darkness came, we did not hide. We did not surrender. We flew into the fire and burned it to ash." Lieutenant Commander Haywan listened from the bridge of the Unconquered. She thought of her parents, her brother, all the people she had lost. "For Earth," she whispered. "For everyone we've lost." The jump drives activated. Space twisted around the fleet, bending in ways that human eyes were not meant to see. For a moment that felt like forever, the 50 ships hung between 2 points in the universe. Then they appeared in orbit around the Vorax homeworld. The enemy was not ready. They had never expected any species to be brave enough or crazy enough to attack their home. Their defensive fleet was scattered. Their weapons were cold. The human ships did not hesitate. They dove toward the planet like falling stars, exactly as the operation's name promised. Vorax ships scrambled to intercept them, but they were too slow. The humans had surprise on their side, and they were not trying to survive. They were trying to reach the surface at any cost. The battle lasted 11 hours. Ships rammed into orbital platforms. Fighters flew into the mouths of Vorax carriers. One by one, the human vessels died, but they kept pushing forward deeper into the defenses, closer to the Queen Mother's fortress. Admiral Bayek's ship, the Never Kneel, was one of the last standing. Its engines were destroyed. Its weapons were empty. Half its crew was dead. But it was directly above the Queen's chamber. "All hands," Bayek said calmly. "Brace for impact." The Never Kneel fell from the sky like a hammer from God. It crashed through the fortress walls, through miles of tunnels and chambers, and finally into the throne room of the Queen Mother herself. The collision killed Admiral Bayek instantly, but not before she saw the Queen's eyes, ancient and evil, and for the first time, afraid. The explosion that followed lit up the sky of the Vorax homeworld. It could be seen from space. It could be seen from other planets. When the light faded, the Queen Mother was dead. Across the galaxy, the Vorax swarm felt their connection shatter. Millions of creatures suddenly lost the voice that had guided them since birth. They screamed and raged and turned on each other. The war was over. 43 human ships had been destroyed. 10,000 lives had been lost, but humanity had done the impossible. Admiral Bayek's final transmission was recovered from the wreckage weeks later. Her voice was calm, even at the end. "Earth endures," she said. "Earth remembers, and Earth never forgives." Those words were carved into a monument that stood at the center of every human city, and they were whispered by children for generations to come. The Galactic Council ridiculed Earth's plea. Then humanity rose to its feet. Part 5. The Reckoning. 1 year had passed since the day humanity had begged the galaxy for help. 1 year since the laughter of the Council had echoed through that great chamber. 1 year since Ambassador Kim Dong-woo had walked away in shame. Now he was walking back. His ship approached Nexara Prime, but this time he was not alone. Behind him stretched the largest fleet ever assembled by a single species, 300 warships painted in the black and gold of the human alliance. Each one carried the word "Remember" on its hull. Each one was crewed by men and women who had lost family to the Vorax and had watched their people rise from despair to victory. Beside Dongwu stood Lieutenant Park Yuna, the same young translator who had been with him on that terrible day. She was no longer young. Her eyes had seen too much death for that, but she stood straight and proud. "Are you ready?" she asked him. Dongwu smiled. It was a warm smile this time, not the cold thing he had learned during the war. "I have been ready for a year," he said. The council chamber was exactly as he remembered it. The same floating platforms, the same thousands of alien representatives, the same 5 elder races at the center, with High Chancellor Morvax at their head. But something was different. The chamber was silent. No one laughed as the human delegation walked to the speaking platform. Every eye watched them with a new emotion, an emotion that many of these ancient species had not felt in centuries: fear. Behind Dongwu walked representatives from 37 other species, small races, weak races, species that the Council had ignored or abandoned over the years. They had come together under humanity's banner, united by a simple truth: the galaxy was not as safe as the Council had promised, and the small could not always depend on the great. Dongwu stepped up to the speaking platform. He looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every representative he could see. Then he began to speak. "1 year ago, I stood in this exact spot. I came to you with respect in my heart and a plea on my lips. I asked for your help against the Vorax swarm. I asked you to honor the values that this council claims to represent." He paused. "And you laughed at me." The silence in the chamber was so complete that Dongwu could hear his own heartbeat. "You called us insects. You called us bacteria. You said we were children playing at being civilized. You told us to go home and die quietly, like good little primitives." His voice hardened. "The Vorax are gone now. Not contained, not pushed back. Gone. We destroyed their queen mother. We broke their swarm. We did in 1 year what this council failed to do in 10,000 years. We did it without your help. We did it while you watched and waited for us to die." High Chancellor Morvax shifted in his seat. His red eyes flickered with something that might have been shame, or might have been anger. "And now you expect punishment," Morvax said. His voice was smaller than before, less certain. "You expect us to bow before you, to beg for mercy." Dongwu shook his head. "No. That is not the human way." He reached into his coat and produced a small data chip. He placed it on the central podium where everyone could see it. "This chip contains everything. Full tactical analysis of our war with the Vorax, the technology we developed, the weapons, the medical advances, the strategies, all of it." He looked around the chamber. "We offer it freely to any species that wishes to learn." A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not what they had expected. This was not what any conquering species had ever done. "You would share your secrets?" asked a representative from one of the lesser races. "Your weapons? After everything they did to you? After we abandoned you?" "Yes," Dongwu said simply. "Because we are not like you. We believe that strength should lift others up, not push them down. We believe that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. We believe that even those who wronged us deserve a chance to learn from their mistakes." He turned to face the elder races directly. "We are not here to conquer. We are not here for revenge. We are here to offer what you denied us: partnership, friendship, a seat at this table as equals, not as beggars." His voice rose, filling the chamber. "But understand this. We will never again kneel before anyone. We will never again beg for our lives. We will never forget what happened here. And if any species ever threatens humanity again, if anyone ever looks at our children and sees easy prey, we will remind them what happened to the Vorax." The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, one representative began to clap. It was Callus of the Mendari, the gentle being who had helped humanity in secret. Tears streamed down his face as he applauded. Another species joined him, then another, and another. Soon, half the chamber was on its feet, applauding the small, stubborn species that had done the impossible. Even some of the elder races bowed their heads in acknowledgement. High Chancellor Morvax sat frozen for a long moment. Then, with obvious difficulty, he spoke. The Council recognizes humanity. You are hereby granted full membership, with all rights and responsibilities that come with it. Dongwu nodded. That is a start. He turned and walked toward the exit, his delegation following behind him. Lieutenant Yuna walked at his side, tears running down her face. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. Dongwu looked back at the chamber one last time. He thought of all the people who had died to bring him to this moment. Captain Oh Min Ho, who had shown the galaxy what courage looked like. Admiral Bayek Ji-hee, who had fallen from the sky like a hammer of God. Lieutenant Commander Shin Hai-wan, who had wanted nothing more than to look into the Queen's eyes. 10,000 heroes who had flown into the fire and never returned. They did it, he said softly. We are just finishing their work. 50 years later, elder statesman Kim Dongwu gave his final interview. He was an old man now, his hair white and his hands trembling. But his eyes were still sharp, still filled with the fire that had carried humanity through its darkest hour. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The human alliance included over 200 species. The old council still existed, but shared power with the new order. Humanity was no longer a joke. It was a leader, a protector, a symbol of hope for small species everywhere. What do you want history to remember about humanity's rise? The interviewer asked. Dongwu was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Remember that we were mocked. Remember that we were alone. Remember that when the galaxy told us to accept our fate, we stood up instead. He looked out the window at a sky full of human ships, human stations, human dreams. They called us insects. They laughed at our plea. They expected us to crawl away and die. He leaned back in his chair, and his smile grew wider. We were never insects. We were seeds, and they made the mistake of watering us with their contempt. Now look at what we have grown into. Outside, the stars burned bright. Among them, humanity reached ever further, ever higher, a species that had faced extinction and emerged stronger than anyone had ever imagined. They had risen to their feet, and they would never kneel again.